You realize you are still alive because the roster has already written you down as dead. In 3 days, the first Emperor's mausoleum will seal its final door, and you are one of the few men who has seen a possible way out. This is not mercy, it is an accounting mistake. In Xianyang, a bad record can kill a man beneath the tomb. It can save one. You stare at that death mark, and for the first time understand that the dead can still be useful. Half a year earlier at the village gate, your mother pressed an old bronze coin into your palm. She said, "Buy a mouthful of hot water on the road." The official said, "Do not delay roll call." You did not look back, because looking back could be recorded as an offense. You walk west with 3,000 conscripted men. Some carry dry grain, some carry spare straw sandals. You carry 2 hands that know how to measure timber. You do not yet know that skill can become a shackle too. The first time you see the mountain, you do not think of the Emperor. You think it looks like an upside-down iron pot, boiling living men underneath. The brighter the torches burn, the more every face turns to ash. On the first day, you carry 19 baskets of earth. On the second, 23. On the third, 5 men are missing, but the mound has risen half a foot. The project never stops, it only changes bodies. The meal is half a bowl, and salt feels like a reward. 1 man hides millet in his sleeve. That night, it is found. The next morning, his place is empty. You learn that even hunger has rules here. The hemp rope bites into your palm, and you clench your teeth instead of crying out. The scribe will write that the people served with devotion. You remember only the taste of blood, dust, and ash. Stop it, scribe. On the 7th day, an old carpenter sees you straighten a crooked beam. He does not praise you. He asks only, "Can you read an incline?" You say yes, he says. Then do not let people know how well. You are moved from the earth-hauling line into the inner workshop. There is less sun and less whipping. You think this is fortune until you smell lacquer, bronze, and sealed wet earth. Good fortune here often means a different way to die. The inner workshop does not lack skilled men. Some make wooden rails, some calibrate bronze triggers. Some draw doors hidden behind other doors. Everyone keeps his head down, because seeing too much is more dangerous than laziness. The first time you descend into the underground palace, cold sweat covers your back. Not because it is dark, but because every 10 steps, another door closes behind you. Each sound of wood and stone makes your life thinner. Rows of terracotta soldiers stand in the dark, an army that does not need food. Living men build soldiers for the dead, and the living are worth less than clay. If clay breaks, someone repairs it. If a man falls, someone drags him away. You are ordered to repair a clay face. It looks like Ernu from your village. It also looks like you tomorrow. Clay does not speak, so clay is safest. You begin to envy a face that does not breathe. At night, men burn wooden slips. Names, counts, deadlines, fire swallows them all. You understand that, in this place, a man disappears from the records before his body disappears. Fire is quieter than a blade. You begin copying accounts for the foreman. How many catties of bronze? How many jars of lacquer? How many wooden wedges? How many men died sick? The last item has no proper column, only blank space. Blank space is convenient. It can hold every death no one wants to admit. The accounts teach you another kind of fear. If 1 catty of bronze is missing, someone investigates. If 1 jar of lacquer is missing, someone is punished. If 1 man is missing, a category is added. In a great work, men are materials that can scream. One day, a gust lifts a cloth cover, and you see a mechanism drawing. Waterways, hidden doors, corridors, all reduced to thin lines. You see it for only a breath, but it feels like swallowing a stone. The foreman asks what you saw, you say. The ink was drying. He watches you for so long that you feel your eyes may also be entered into the register. You lower your head and do not even dare to count your breaths. Ernu trades half a cake for a warning. On the day the tomb is sealed, inner craftsmen will not be allowed through the outer gate. When he says it, his eyes stay on the ground, as if someone beneath the earth is already listening. That night, you scratch the lines you remember onto the back of a bamboo slip and hide it in your seam. Not for wealth and not for betrayal. You only want to know whether the sky still exists above you. Rain falls hard, but the guards still call roll. If a man coughs, someone looks at him. Here, even sickness sounds like an excuse to escape. You learn to swallow your cough back into your body. The first man who runs is dragged back. He is not dead, and that is worse, because everyone is forced to see that he is still alive. Punishment that breathes controls men better than a corpse. The foreman pushes the register toward you and orders you to check the fugitives. You see the name of Ernie's older brother. You also see a small mistaken death mark beside your own name. It is tiny, like fate briefly falling asleep. With one scrape, you can save a man or condemn one. As the blade touches wood, you hear the grain complain like bone. You learn that writing can bleed too. You do not remove your own death mark. At that moment, you understand that survival is not a clean road. It is stained from the first step with someone else's life. You are not brave, you simply want to live too much. The foreman notices that your hand is steady, and your writing steadier. So he gives you the gate registry. It is not power. It is a noose that feels like jade while it tightens around your neck. The closer you sit to the records, the farther you move from other men. You begin deciding who may enter which door, who may receive how many wedges, whose illness can be recorded, and whose death should wait one more day on paper. Each mark you make changes someone's road in a place you cannot see. As the underground palace nears completion, searches become more careful. Bronze is counted, lacquer is counted. Even a man's shadow seems to be counted. You sew the bamboo slip deeper into your clothes, as if sewing your heart shut. That evening, an urgent horse arrives from the east, throwing up dust like a dying snake. No one tells you what happened, but the gate soldiers do not sleep that night, and the torches do not go out. The next day the seals are changed. On the third day, outer work stops and the inner workshops burn lamps all night. You hear someone say the world must not know the emperor has already gone cold on the road. You do not dare ask what cold means. You do not understand court politics. You understand doors. Before, the gates kept people from entering. Now, they keep people from leaving. When the direction changes, every life changes direction with it. The old carpenter slips a broken ruler into your hand and says, "If one day all the doors are shut, remember that water runs downward." He does not say the word escape, because that word can kill. You hold the broken ruler like half a last message. At last, you understand that the thin line on the mechanism drawing is not a road. It is a drainage channel, narrow, black filthy, but more like a door than any door left to you. Sometimes a way out looks less like a path than a wound. You pretend to check wooden wedges, but your ear is pressed to a stone crack, listening for water. The sound is faint, like a dying man still breathing. You tell yourself that, as long as it still sounds, the outside has not completely disappeared. Ernie begs you to take him. He says his little sister is still waiting at home. You neither promise nor refuse, because a promise is too heavy and refusal sounds too much like an official. You only ask whether he can keep silent. The rumor spreads like mildew. After the sealing, anyone who knows the mechanisms will remain inside. Some call it gossip, some call it procedure. You only know the number of guards has doubled, while the grain sacks have halved. The first time you see the order token for cleansing the inner works, the surface is clean, and the meaning is filthy. Clean means no witnesses. Clean means every cry remains behind the door. The foreman orders you to copy the final list. 173 living men, 21 sick, 64 craftsmen. By the end, your fingers turn cold, because this does not feel like a list. It feels like an epitaph. You move Ernie's token under the outer transport team and replace it with the marker of a man dead for 3 days. The stroke is light. The guilt is heavy. The mark that saves him steals the last clean corner from another man's death. The dead man has no face now, only a marker. You tell yourself he is already gone. But the marker sways in the lamplight, as if nodding, and also as if shaking its head. You begin to fear men without faces. The foreman's finger stops on that line. He asks why the outer transport team has one more man. You say the rain blurred the ink last night. He smiles like the back of a knife laid against your skin. That night the foreman leads you into a deeper corridor. He says there are 2 kinds of clever men. One kind lives for himself, and one kind believes he can save others. You understand him. The second kind dies faster. You see spare stone gates, a dropping door winch, and blank markers stacked in the corner. They have prepared containers for silence in advance. They do not even need to count at the last moment. The foreman asks where the drainage drawing is. He does not search you, because he knows fear turns out pockets better than hands do. You say you do not know, but your throat almost betrays you first. In that instant, you nearly sell everyone. You press your mother's old coin against the seam of your clothes. That coin cannot buy hot water, but it holds down one life, and many lives with it. Suddenly you want to go home, but you do not dare finish the thought. 24 hours before sealing, the bell sounds down from the surface. It is not struck for the dead, it is struck for the living. Your remaining time now has a number. Each strike feels like roll call. The craftsmen are divided into 3 teams: doors, triggers, water. Each team has soldiers watching. Before, soldiers feared you would steal things. Now, they fear you will steal yourself. Even the tools are tied with cords. You replace a long wedge with a short one, 1 inch shorter, and the door may slow by 1 breath. 1 breath will not save the world, but it may let 1 body slip through. You carve hope into the shape of wood. At 18 hours, the meal suddenly grows by 1 ladle. No one cheers. Everyone knows even livestock may be fed well before slaughter. You look at the millet in your bowl and cannot swallow. At 12 hours, the guards collect private things: combs, sandals, cloth scraps, keepsakes, family letters, all piled together. If a man cannot take even his things away, it means he will not be taken away either. At 6 hours, they rehearse the sealing. The winch turns. The stone gate drops. Soldiers step back 3 paces. The motions are too practiced. You understand, this is not the first time men have been turned into procedure. At dusk, Ernu is dragged back. Someone informed on him. When he sees you, he is relieved for half a breath, then understands. You saved him once. Now his capture may drag you down with him. The guards ask who gave him the route. Ernu's lips tremble, but he does not look at you. For the first time, you understand that silence can be louder than shouting. It can carry a man's life behind the teeth. The foreman gives you the blade and orders you to erase Ernu's name. If you refuse, 2 men die. If you obey, you live like a bone has been removed from your body. The blade is light, but your hand cannot lift it. Ernu is taken into the dark, leaving only 1 broken straw sandal. The scribe will never write about this shoe. The scribe will write that the mausoleum was grand, and the system orderly, "Stop it, scribe. There is still mud in the shoe, and a road in the mud." You do not cry. Crying would suggest you still think of yourself as human. You hide the sandal beneath the firewood like a piece of testimony. But testimony has no mouth, only you are left to hurt. On the final night, every lamp is lit. The underground palace shines like day, but everyone knows this day has no sun and will have no morning. Firelight lies across their faces like paper burned before burial. You stand beside the stone door and hear the winch bite notch by notch. Behind the door, men check the triggers. Outside the door, men check you. Both sides are roads to death, only the water still breathes under the ground. You touch the short wedge. It is so small it feels like a ridiculous thought. But a man often survives by something that ridiculous. You steady your hand, the way you once steadied the crooked beam. A rumble rolls from the deep chamber like the mountain coughing. Men shout for water, for their mothers, for the door. The guards look to the door first, not to the men. Orders arrive faster than human voices. In the confusion, you pry open the side gap. The extra breath from the short wedge truly appears. Behind you, someone calls your name, but that name is already dead in the records. A dead man cannot turn back. You turn back anyway. 3 hands reach out of the firelight, and you can pull only 1. You grab the nearest sleeve, but only torn cloth comes back. That half sleeve weighs more than a man. When the stone door falls, voices are still inside. Later, perhaps someone will call it only a rumor. You only know rumor cannot scrape a throat roar. When the door closes, half the world loses its sound. You crawl into the drainage channel. Muddy water fills your mouth and nose. The bamboo slip is washed away, and the coin presses into your chest. You suddenly remember your mother saying, "Buy a mouthful of hot water on the road." Now you must fight for 1 mouthful of cold air. The exit is not an exit, it is a barred grate. You measure the gap with the broken ruler, ram it with your shoulder, bite at the wooden wedge. You are not escaping, you are fighting a mountain for one breath. The mountain says nothing, it only presses down. In the end, the old coin catches the latch. It could not buy hot water, but it buys a gap half a palm wide. You squeeze through, leaving skin on the iron, like a tax paid to the exit. At dawn, the transport carts leave the camp. You hide beneath one, covered by wet hemp sacks. When the guard calls your name, the wooden record says you are already dead. Death answers for you. Simone lifts the sack, and light falls beside your face. He asks, "Which body is this?" Another man says, "It is already dead in the records." For the first time, you thank a false line as if it were a real door. Years later, rain still wakes you. Other men hear rain and think the sky is shedding water. You hear rain and think the drainage channel beneath the tomb is rising again. You do not dare live in a room too bright or close a door too tightly. You hear men praise the mausoleum. They call it vast, majestic, proof of how strong an empire can be. You look down at the coin in your palm and want only to ask, how strong must an empire be if it fears a few craftsmen walking out alive? You survive, but the mountain keeps Ernie, the old carpenter, and part of you sealed inside forever. Later, people will see soldiers, palaces, and wonders. You remember only that there are still voices behind the door.